Okay. Here's what it means to solve a quadratic. Please write this down. To solve a quadratic means you are going to find where y equals 0. And if you think about, so y equals 0, those are the x-intercepts. So really what you're doing is finding the x-intercepts where they cross the y-axis. That's not right, where they cross the x-axis, because that's where y is 0. So if you are asked to solve a quadratic, you are being asked to find where y is equal to 0, set y equal to 0, and solve. So it's like you're solving an equation, but instead of having it be an equation like we had at the beginning of the year, it's quadratic, so it's a little bit more complicated. Okay, your solutions are x-intercepts. Whatever your x-intercepts are, and that's where y equals 0. Those are your answers. You have some other names for them. And this is important to write down because it'll come up on your assignment. So we're going to call them AKA, also known as zeros, because you are finding where y equals 0. Roots or solutions. So look for these words. If I ask you what are the zeros of the quadratic, what are the roots of the quadratic, what are the solutions, I am asking for the x-intercepts. Okay, here's some examples of your solutions. A quadratic can have 2, 1, or none. So over here, this is no real solutions. How come?
Because there's no...
What is there none of?
Never touches the x-axis.
It never touches the x-axis. Carson, why is this no solutions?
It doesn't go through the x.
Thank you. Okay. This one is one solution because the vertex is on the x-axis. It touches once. This one is 2 because it crosses twice. Pretty simple, right? We're going to talk about 2 methods to solve today. The first is by graphing. You look at the graph and you see where are my x-intercepts. Your x-intercepts are your solutions or your roots or your zeros. So the question is, what are the solutions of the graphs below? Tell the person next to you, what are the solutions? Oh, I hear it. My solutions are, write these as points, please. My solutions are 2, 0, and 6, 0. Those are your solutions. It's a good idea to graph whenever it's really obvious where the x-intercepts are. If it's not obvious, you need to use a different method. Okay, look at the next one. What are your solutions? There's only one because the vertex is at the x-intercept. The solution is 3, 0. That's it for graphing. If you can graph the quadratic and tell me where the x-intercepts are, you have found your solutions. Easy. Okay. The other method we're talking about today is square root, which is solving an equation. Here's how we're going to do that. You got to get the thing that's squared by itself, which means you need to isolate it. Get it alone. You will then take the square root of both sides. Square roots have both positive and negative answers. Like the square root of 9 is 3 and negative 3. Because 3 times 3 is 9, and negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. So you'll have to do plus and minus, and then you'll keep going if necessary. This is a good idea to use this whenever there is no bx term. So remember, it's ax squared plus bx plus c. If b is 0, then you can use square root. Or if there's a squared quantity in parentheses, that can be isolated, and you'll see what I mean. We'll talk more about that next week. For today, let's get to solving. Notice how this is set equal to 0, because this is y. So you're finding your x-intercepts, because right now y equals 0. That's what you want. Okay, just think back to your solving equations. What do you think I should do first? We're going to add 36. We're trying to get the squared term by itself. So m squared equals 36. Okay, you might not know this. How do I get rid of a squared? So this is an operation. I need the inverse operation. You take the square root of both sides. There's a poster over there that might help. What's the square root of 36? 6, because 6 times 6. But you need to write positive or negative 6.
What does that mean? What does that do?
Guys, what is negative 6 times negative 6? 36. So both of those actually work, because there's two intercepts here. There's one at 6, 0, and there's one at negative 6, 0. That's what that means. There's two. All right. Well, let's go again. Next one. We're solving an equation. What needs to happen first? Minus the 16. And this one is nice because you get 0 when you do that. So 4d squared equals 0. The square term's not by itself yet. You have to get rid of the 4. 4 is being multiplied. How do you undo it? Divide. So you want something squared equals a number. So now you have d squared equals 0. Take the square root of both sides. Okay. Is there such thing as positive and negative 0? No. So your answer is just going to be 0. So your x-intercept is at the point 0, 0. X equals 0 when y equals 0. Moving on. This is not isolated yet. What should I do first? We can divide by negative 2. Okay, so that would give me x squared equals negative 4. Okay, so x squared is isolated. Now you can take the square root. Try and type this in your calculator. What's the square root of negative 4? Type in your calculator. What's the square root of negative 4? The square root button you get by doing second x squared. Second x squared to get the square root. What does it say? Error.
Non-real.
This is an imaginary number. You cannot take the square root of a negative. This has no real solutions. If you see this, no. You can't do that. You can't take the square root of a negative number. This is going to look like a parabola that is either above or below the x-axis. It's never going to touch. That's why it's no real solutions, because it will never cross the x-axis. Okay, let's do the next one. Oh. Hannah, what do you think I should do first? Yep. We're trying to get that x squared by itself. So negative 5x squared equals 5. Emily, what next? Okay. So you get x squared equals negative 1. And then you got to take the square root of both sides. Look at what we just did. Can you take the square root of a negative? No, what? I have to say no real solutions. This will never cross the x-axis. Okay, and just a couple more. These ones are a little bit different. They have parentheses. These are in kind of like vertex form. So the other ones you've seen are standard form. So these guys, you don't have to write this down, but you can. All the top 4 were standard form. These bottom 2 are in vertex form, which is why they're different. If you don't remember the difference between standard form and vertex form, look over on the whiteboard over by Serenity. It's written up there. Okay. So these are a little bit different. The squared part of it is already by itself. So you can take the square root right now, and that gets rid of the squared. What's the square root of 25? 5, positive 5, or negative 5. So you have to say x minus 1 equals plus or minus 5. Okay, you're going to split this up into 2 parts because there's 2 equations here. 1 equals positive 5 and 1 equals negative 5. X minus 1 equals positive 5 and x minus 1 equals negative 5. And you have to solve both because there's 2 x-intercepts. Let's add 1 on the left. So over here we get x equals 6. Add 1. And over here we get negative 4. So your 2 points are at 6, 0 and at negative 4, 0. This has 2 solutions. If you like, you can do the next one by yourself. You can go ahead. Squared term is already by itself, so you can take the square root. What's the square root of 0? 0. Not positive or negative 0, that's not a thing. So you don't have to split it up this time. You can just solve. You get 1 answer, and that's because your vertex is on the x-axis. Your vertex is at negative 7, 0. So negative 7, comma 0. That is your point. All right. Please.